He's out there all alone. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how successful is he going to be? And my view is that for him to be successful, he has to convince the Europeans and the Americans to accept Russia's terms for ending this war. And of course, the Ukrainians themselves had to accept Russia's terms for ending this war. And those are pretty severe terms from the point of view of the West. You remember that Putin says that he will not negotiate. He will not even negotiate unless the West and Ukraine concede that he controls all four of those oblasts that he has formally, or Russia has formally annexed, and withdraws Ukrainian forces from those oblasts. That's point number one. And point number two is that Ukraine has to declare its neutrality and swear that it will not join NATO.
Which is inevitable, right?
Well, no, it may be inevitable, but these are the two prerequisites for just getting negotiations started. And the question you have to ask yourself, Danny, is do you think that all of these other European leaders besides Orban and the Ukrainians will be willing to swallow those two preconditions? And I think at the present moment, that's hard to imagine. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I think the only possibility that you will have negotiations by the end of the year and that Orban will be proved correct is if the Ukrainian military collapses on the battlefield. If the Ukrainian military collapses, then the incentive for the Ukrainians themselves and for the West to move to negotiations becomes very great. But absent that, I find it hard to believe that this will go to negotiations or go to the negotiating table by the end of the year. Again, because I think that Orban, unfortunately, is an outlier.
To what extent do you think that Putin, when he made these declarations in the early part of July about what his conditions were, the harsh ones that you just laid out, that if he doesn't get those, that he may just say, all right, I'm not even going to worry about talking, I'm going to go and capture these other areas?
Well, he has a powerful incentive to take those 4 additional oblasts, to take a huge slug of territory, not to take territory that's filled with ethnic Ukrainians. That he doesn't want to do. So the western part of Ukraine, I think he'll stay away from, but I think he'll take the 4 oblasts to the west of the 4 oblasts he now controls, or he's now annexed, if he can do that. And the reason is, just listen to what Tony Blinken said at the start of the show. Tony Blinken said that it's basically inevitable that Ukraine is going to become part of NATO. That means that Ukraine is going to remain a mortal enemy of Russia. It's going to remain joined at the hip with the West. And the West and Ukraine are going to continue to wage war against Russia for as far as the eye can see. Well, as a good military man, you know if you're going to be in Russia's shoes, or you're in Russia's shoes and you're thinking about waging war against the West and Ukraine forever, you want to control as much Ukrainian territory as possible, number one. And number two, you want to go to great lengths to turn Ukraine into a dysfunctional rump state. It's in your interest to do that. So it's very important to understand that when people like Tony Blinken and Joe Biden make all these comments about how they're going to make sure that Ukraine survives and does well and Ukraine becomes part of NATO, that they're basically signing Ukraine's death warrant.